Okay, so this is the Week 7 team builder. My name is Scribbles, and this week we're going up against the Gold Duck State Warriors and Dark Soul Project. So Dark Soul Project is doing pretty well. He's 4-2 currently, and he's got a very threatening team. This was actually, I think, the hardest team building week that I've had, partly because I was somewhat limited on time, but mostly because this team's got a lot of threats. Tapu Koko is an amazing mon in draft format. It can do a lot of different things very well. Giratina is a Pokemon that I really don't think about at all. I don't play Ubers. It's not a Pokemon in VGC, so I'm not too familiar with it. But it's super bulky, and it can do a lot of things that aren't favorable for my team at all. Ferrothorn is great. Ferrothorn has a lot of utility. I only have one Pokemon with Fire Stab, and it doesn't like rocks, so Ferrothorn kind of competes with that decently well, given the massive type disadvantage. Blaziken is top of the kill leaderboard. Blaziken is a tremendous threat, and you need to dedicate a lot of your team to countering it. And then from there, Slacking. I remember joking in the draft when he took Slacking that if he makes one person run Protect, then it's worth drafting, and made me run Protect, so it's pretty good there. Melodic, Umbreon, Great Wall, Xurkitree, terribly threatening under electric terrain. Chansey, another Great Wall. Staraptor, also another good offensive threat. So a lot of pressure put on by his team overall, and yet it has really good defensive synergy. So when I went into the team building, first thing I looked at is I wanted to pick out a win condition, and it was difficult because there isn't one win condition for his whole team. His defensive core is too good for it. So the Pokemon I landed on was Magearna, and the reason I landed on Magearna was that Shift Gear, you can see here, it's 251 at max speed. Shift Gear doubles your speed, you can see to 502. Blaziken, Mega Blaziken at +1 is 492. So Mega Blaziken, short of like a double protect or something, can't switch in on Magearna. It always dies. Well, it doesn't always die, but the standard 252 spread will die to a Fleur Cannon Life Orb. So that is kind of a non-synergy, having Fleur Cannon and Shift Gear. You get a boosted up speed, and then you Fleur Cannon, and now you're minus special attack. But the biggest thing about Magearna is once it got through Blaziken, even -1, which you'll be -1 if you get a kill, because you drop 2 stages, and then Soul Heart boosts you back up 1. Even -1, it was doing a lot to Giratina. Depending on its set, it could threaten a KO on some sets. Not particularly good sets against my team, but some sets it could threaten a KO. So that was exciting to me. Calm Mind and Focus Blast gave me a way to somewhat deal with Chansey, more so Ferrothorn. Basically, this was never going to do anything until Chansey was dead. I played around with some Pain Split sets to potentially break through Chansey, but not having fighting coverage just felt bad, especially because the one thing about this team that you might notice looking at it is fighting resists are the top 2, and other than that, it's alternates weakness, neutral, weakness, neutral, weakness, neutral pretty much for the rest of the team. So fighting coverage is really good. I opted for Focus Blast over Aura Sphere because Ferrothorn and Chansey, it does more damage. I guess you take the risk of missing to get the additional damage. So that was the first set. Nothing too crazy with the spread. Pretty straightforward for a Shift Gear set. Life Orb is what guaranteed the KO on Blaziken without any Calm Mind boost, so that was pretty straightforward. The next member that I put on the team was Crocodile. I actually kind of always knew I wanted to be Moxie. Intimidate against Blaziken is kind of nice, but I have to sack him on to get an Intimidate off, basically, and even then, SD sets don't really care, and they just kind of set up anyway. So I suppose there's something to be said about a really bulky Intimidate set, but I wanted to do other things with Crocodile. Most notably, I think earlier we mentioned the weakness to fighting, and I saw an opportunity here. Sub Focus Punch really could break through pretty much all the walls on his team. Giratina accepted, but we also have Crunch to deal with that. And, we get a defense drop, and all of a sudden Giratina is not a check. If we get a Moxie boost, Giratina is not a check. So this set could do a lot of work. I flirted with Choice Scarf sets to outspeed Koko, but it just seems too predictable. And then if I'm locked into Earthquake and Giratina can come in for free, or if I'm locked into a fighting move, and Giratina or Coco can come in for free. None of those outcomes are really good for me. So I landed on this set, Crunch, Earthquake, Focus Punch, Substitute. Pretty standard sub punch set. I was hoping it would catch his walls off guard and be able to break through and then get a +1, and then from there, he doesn't really have great switch-ins. He has to kind of stack an additional Mon. If I'm behind a Substitute at +1, something's dying. There's not anything he can switch in that results in him not dying at that point. Air Balloon Coco notwithstanding, I guess. Potentially. The set's pretty standard. I think 292. I should confirm this really quick. 292 outsped. What did that outspeed? Timid Circuitry was basically my speed investment. Rest dumped into special defense and then max attack Jolly. Yeah, I ended up going with Fight Z over Dark Z. I was kind of tossing that up and back and forth in my head. Dark Z is good for Giratina, but it's kind of bad otherwise. Fight Z just allows me to get off a Focus Punch without being behind a sub. Next set is Conkelder. This is another set that I went back and forth on for a while. AV with this investment, 252, 100, means that a Fairy Z from Coco doesn't KO. I think ever. Maybe there's like a particular spread. I think that was for Timid. I think I EV'd for Timid. I didn't feel he could run Modest with a lot of the members on my team. Crobat, I think he might still outspeed Latias. I should check that again. This all made sense in my head at one point. So Latias hits 394, Coco. What? No, that's Crobat. 350, Coco hits 359. So he could actually outspeed. So maybe Modest was viable. He'd still have to be Fairy Z. I like the matchup that Assault Vest had, mostly because I could get damage off on Coco, or at least force him to switch into Conkelder an additional time. Drain Punch, Mach Punch, Ice Punch, Poison Jab. Ice Punch, Poison Jab taking advantage of Sheer Force. Drain Punch, Mach Punch just for stab. Again, fighting coverage really, really good against his team, so I was running a lot of that across the board. But overall, nothing too complicated. Like I said, Assault Vest is kind of the interesting choice here, and that was, like I said, just for the Coco matchup to hopefully snipe him with Poison Jab. Next set is Uxie. It's the first time bringing Uxie. It's a recent addition to the team. I went with a really heavily physically defensive set. This is where we're starting to get into how do we deal with Blaziken. And Blaziken's terrifying, and Uxie can kind of deal with it to some degree. So Toxic, Psyshock, Stealth Rock, U-Turn. So this is my rocker. Crocodile had other things to do this match, so I needed to bring rocks somewhere. U-Turn just for positioning. Toxic helps me with Giratina. If I can get a Toxic off on Giratina and wear it down a little bit, that helps my team a lot because I have a lot of trouble breaking it otherwise. Magearna is probably my best option. Latias can do some damage, but it's so bulky that it's really hard to break through. And then Psyshock allows me to deal a lot of damage to Blaziken. Wikiberry is just for recovery. I think there was a lot of Giratina calcs where I could survive and the Wikiberry would activate and I would basically get up to a reasonable amount of health so I could still take a hit from Blaziken. Next set is Mega Latias. Fairly straightforward set in terms of the moves. Dragon Pulse, Psyshock, Toxic Recover. Again, Psyshock to help deal with Blaziken. Gets me some damage off on Chansey if it comes down to that. The spread is interesting. So this spread survives Draco from Modest Max Giratina, and it also makes Night Slash a 2-hit KO from Mega Blaziken. So kind of hedging my bets against both. Toxic there again to potentially get a Toxic off on Giratina. That seems really important this match. Recover just for longevity. I considered running kind of a trapping set to clear the way for Magearna, specifically against Chansey. So I had Whirlpool, Toxic, Refresh, Recover for a while with just basically the same spread. I didn't end up deciding that I needed much special attack investment based on some of the calcs that I saw. I ended up not going for it because if I didn't have an attack, Blaziken could potentially set up on me. I didn't really have much way of threatening to Blaziken. Toxic Whirlpool is not how you want to deal with Blaziken. It'll just break right through you. So yeah, somewhat of a defensive set, but with just a little bit of offensive pressure so that it wasn't, completely dead in the water if Blaziken came in. And then the last set is, this is the set I had the least confidence in. We kind of went left to right up here on sets that I thought were good to sets that I was just like, I don't know, throwing something at the board. The reason I ended up bringing Zera Aura is, again, fighting coverage is really good. Plasma Fist, I can take advantage of electric terrain to some degree against some of his other Pokemon. I mean, the only real issue with that is his Pokemon that resist fighting also resist electric, so the coverage between fighting and electric is usually pretty good, but in this matchup, it's pretty bad. Volt Switch is, I don't want to say mostly the reason I ended up bringing Zero, but it's a pretty significant reason. His team doesn't have an electric immunity, so Volt Switch is free. I get a lot of positioning out of Volt Switch. Life Orb is just for damage output, and then Protect. I think Protect's kind of a holdover. I was considering a bulk up set, and if Slacking comes, then I have a way to kind of punish Slacking as a revenge killer, specifically like a Choice Scarf Slacking. I don't think he would bring anything aside from Choice Scarf Slacking. So basically if I had bulk up, I could get a kill. Slacking comes into revenge, I protect, Slacking sits there and looks like an idiot, and then I get another free bulk up, or I get another attack off with basically zero risk to myself. But it ultimately ended up that the fighting electric coverage just isn't good enough, and I think battling this team, you can almost guarantee, you can see my predictions for what he's going to bring up there in the top right. If you prepare for this team and you don't count on Koko, Blaziken, Giratina, and then some combination of his walls, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. So electric fighting against those three isn't great. I mean, Blaziken it does okay against, but it's not great overall. The set, 152 speed, EVs, timid, puts me 1 point, 2 points out of Koko because of the jump there from 394 to 396. Max attack, and then the remainder dumped in defense. His team is pretty heavily physically biased if you look across it. He's got Melodic and Xurkitree and Koko as kind of special attackers, and then Giratina is more or less mixed. I guess Koko you could basically consider mixed. I mean, the only Pokemon that are pure special attackers are Melodic and Xurkitree, whereas if you look at the special or the physical attackers, you have Blaziken, which should dominate your prep, Ferrothorn, Slacking, Umbreon isn't really an attacker, but Staraptor. So physical defense just seemed more useful to me. It was flip a coin, more or less. I just ended up dumping in the physical defense. So that's the team. Overall strategy, kill Chansey, set up with Magearna, and win. That's pretty much it. Just I need to break down his walls, and then get Magearna in position to set up, and then just basically clear as much from his team as I can, and then hopefully, after that, Krok and Conk can hopefully break through what's left, and Uxie and Latias can prevent Blaziken from just wrecking my team. Yeah, well, let's see how the battle goes. I did it all. So he brought Pharaoh and Chansey. Both of them do a marvelous job of blocking Magearna, and I did bring quite a bit of fighting coverage for Ferrothorn, but I didn't bring Ho-Oh, so I don't have quad effective coverage. If he's physically bulky, I have a lot of trouble. If he's just bulky, what Ferrothorn isn't, I'm gonna have a lot of trouble breaking that. The 4 Mons on the right look very, very difficult to break. The 2 Mons on the left look very, very capable of breaking my team. One thing that I was paranoid about in team building was a Fairy MZ Koko, and I just really don't have answers for that. We talked about Kinkeldor being able to survive from full, so that's potentially an option. Looking at the team, as far as the lead, Uxie to get up rocks was something I considered. But if Ferrothorn and Spike Stacks, I don't have defog, I don't have any way to remove hazards, and Spike Stack is going to be oppressive on me when he has defensive walls that he can just kind of pivot around for free. So my initial thought is the only thing I have that really threatens a majority of his leads is Crocodile. It can threaten Chansey, it can threaten Ferrothorn, it can threaten Umbreon, it can threaten Giratina to some degree, and then it threatens Koko and Blaziken with Earthquake. So it felt like my best lead, so that's what I ended up going with. So I lead Crocodile, he leads Koko. This isn't great for me. Again, paranoid beyond belief about Fairy MZ, any sort of Fairy attack. The one nice thing here that I didn't really think about until I got into the battle is Moxie disguises Choice Scarf. So in this particular position, if I was Intimidate, he would know for sure that he's faster than me, and he wouldn't feel threatened. Because I'm Moxie, he doesn't know if I'm Choice Scarf, and Choice Scarf Moxie seems like a pretty good set. But in this particular position, I did not want to risk Crocodile. I needed Crocodile to help with to break Giratina, and it did a lot of work against, basically his whole team. This Crocodile was looking to be my best wall breaker, kind of at team preview. So I ended up wanting to pull a switch here. Thinking if I assume he's not going to go for an electric attack, and electric attack really isn't a play here. If he doesn't know if I'm Scarf. He's gonna go for, he could go for a U-turn, could go for a Dazzling Gleam, could just fire off the Fairy MZ. It felt to me that my best pivot here was Uxie. I knew Uxie could take a hit. I hated to have Uxie take damage early, but I also didn't want Magearna to take damage. Magearna wasn't in a position to set up because Chansey is still at full health. So the best play to me, it seemed, was to just go ahead and pivot into Uxie. And he goes into Ferrothorn, and so, this is an alternate lead. This could have been our lead just as easily. But it's a bad lead for me because I don't have Defog. I brought Latias, which is my only potential Defogger, so I suppose that could slightly influence Dark Soul to not go for rocks. In this position, I'm just going to go ahead and get my rocks up, just start getting some passive damage. He has 2 Defoggers. Yeah, 2 Defoggers, so it's not a great position here for me. I go for the rocks, get them up, assuming he go for rocks too. He goes for T-Wave and misses. This is bad. It's always bad when you miss T-Wave, especially early game. Even neglecting speed interactions, that's a 30% chance that Uxie just doesn't accomplish what it's trying to accomplish the rest of the game. So missing the Thunder Wave helps me for sure. In this position, I can hard switch out. I kind of decided to U-turn. I'll take a little chip from Iron Barbs, but I want to just make sure that he stays in before I pivot out. I end up U-turning out just to, again, make sure that he's not pivoting into something else. I bring in Zeraora. It felt like a mid-ground play here. Power Up would do a lot, but Zeraora's health, it's important, but it's not as important as a lot of my other Pokemon. I didn't want to go into Magearna again because I don't want to be taking any unnecessary damage. Something like Gyro Ball does a pretty good amount to me since I am heavily speed invested. I didn't want to take another T-Wave, so that seemed to eliminate Lottie, Conk, also Magearna for that same reason. Dark Soul makes a good play here and fires off a Leech Seed, predicting me to go into Zera or, potentially Crocodile. Crocodile was not going to be a play in case of Power Whip. So again, this seems like investment mid-ground. He fires off a Leech Seed, misses, so back-to-back misses. Not great for Dark Soul by any means. It gives him some passive recovery, which is huge. In this position, I assume that he's fearing a Fight Z or something like that, because Sarah has fighting coverage and it can run Z moves. So in this position, I end up firing off just a Volt Switch, predicting a switch, and he stays in, which is a good play on his part. At this point, I'm thinking he's Choppleberry, something like that. He didn't have reason to fear the close combat. And we haven't revealed an item on Ferrothorn yet, so that was kind of my assumption. So I Volt Switch out. Dark Soul makes a good play and fires off a Leech Seed. It gets a little chip on Lottie. So a little chip on Lottie's okay. A crit from Night Slash does, I think, max like 79 or something like that. So a little chip's okay. Here I figured that Pharaoh was threatened by Hidden Power Fire, because again, I'm going off the assumption that he is Choppleberry at this point because he didn't switch out. And so I assume he's threatened and is going to want to switch. So I go ahead and make a double back into Zera, and he switches into Chansey. So this is pretty good positioning for me. Zera, again, with the potential for fighting coverage. Chansey is running Eviolite. There's not another item you're going to run on Chansey. Maybe you could pull off something like really niche to... I don't even know what you would run on Chansey besides Eviolite. So here it seems like a fighting attack's pretty free. He could go into Giratina, I suppose, which would be good. But then I just Volt Switch out and bring in Krok, and he could burn me, I guess, would be about the worst thing he could do. So he goes to Ferrothorn, and here I get off the close combat damage. So fight weak into fight weak, and we realize he's not Choppleberry here. So this is huge for me. this damage on Ferrothorn means that it's going to have a hard time recovering. It's more or less dead. It's about how risky or how aggressive I want to be killing it at this point. It could get Wish Pass from Chansey or Umbreon, I suppose, so that's something that I need to consider. I do the damage here. At this point, I'm pretty sure Plasma Fist kills. I don't know his exact spread, but the calcs were looking pretty strongly in my favor. I think what I was seeing from like a default set was something like 20, 21, 22%. I think I looked at the damage from close combat, and it was a kill from Plasma Fist. So he protects, I Plasma Fist. Here I'm thinking he's going to switch out. He's going to try and preserve Ferrothorn. It still survives rocks easily. He's got a bunch of Wish Passers, so I just Volt Switch. Volt Switch never killed here, so I knew it didn't kill, but I assumed he would save Ferrothorn. I fire off the Volt Switch. He makes another good play. So like Dark Soul's made a lot of good plays. He's been punished a little bit in terms of missing on T-Wave and Leech Seed, and he made a really aggressive play on, going from Chansey to Ferrothorn, and has put him in a bad spot. Here he fires off the Leech Seed, which is a good play. Get back some health. We're in another kind of interesting position here. Crunch kills. Pretty sure Earthquake kills, but I don't think I was ever going to go for Earthquake here. So at this point, I just fire off. No, I double into Conk. Why did I double into Conk? I should not. So I just finished the battle, but I should not be assuming as many things. I guess I assumed Protect, and that he would try and get more health back from Leech Seed. And he ends up going for the Power Whip. Another good aggressive play. So Dark Soul is playing. He's predicting me very, very well here, and I'm kind of playing around this Ferrothorn more than I should probably. At this point, I just go for the Ice Punch. Again, a mid-ground play. There is some risk that he could be running a speedy Ferrothorn or something like that, which would be very problematic. Ice Punch killed Ferrothorn. It also damaged Giratina, which was the switch-in that I was most worried about. So I get the Ice Punch off. I take the Barb's damage, and I'm at 53%, and Coco comes in. So this is probably the biggest turn in the battle. In this position, with my set, the AV set, I survive Thunderbolt easily. I survive Dazzling Gleam. It does a max of 50. I'm not sure about Thunder, per se. I didn't check that. But basically, I feel confident that I'm going to survive an attack here. And I know Poison Jab will kill Coco. So I stick in, and I just go for the Poison Jab. Worst case scenario for me would be like a Volt Switch, something like that. The Volt Switch is still risky. I have 2 electric immunities, and then none of my other Pokemon really care too much about taking an electric attack. Lot of good bulk on my team here. So I stay in. Grass Knot, perhaps predicting the Crocodile, which is a good play. Fairy here would be a godsend for him, because he could click Fairy attacks super freely. Magearna resists, but Magearna then gets outsped, so who cares? So that doesn't kill, and I go for the Poison Jab and knock out Coco. So at this point, I'm in a great position. Dark Soul said he might have been trying to fire off the Grassy MZ, which still wouldn't have killed my set. If he was Fairy and Modest, I think I had a chance to die, but it was still... I think it was still decently in my favor where at the HP I was at. So here, this position's kind of tough with Giratina. I want damage off on Giratina. I think even Modest Max Dragon Pulse is a roll. I think I survive Hex. I do not survive Draco, obviously. So at this point, I didn't really want to switch anything in on this. I could get super aggressive and switch in Magearna or something like that, but I didn't really want to throw my win con out, which at this point, most of the things that Magearna would potentially kill, I don't really need anymore. So I feel like I could have gone Magearna here, but I had a chance to live depending on investment, and I just wanted to get damage off on this, and Ice Punch put him in range of everything from Krok. So it seemed worth it to stay in. Dragon Pulse knocks me out. I got a spread later. It always knocked me out. In this position, I thought he was threatened by... So I bring in Krok, because Krok is obviously my answer to Giratina. I bring in Krok. At this point, I assume that he's threatened by a Dark Z from Crocodile, which pretty sure killed from this range if I was like max attack. And since I'm a higher base speed, the assumption would be that I would outspeed any of his sets. So I go ahead and bring in Krok. I try and get off a sub to kind of get the sub focus punch thing going, but he just keeps firing off Dragon Pulses. So that's not going to work. He's just going to keep throwing those off. I pivot into Uxie, who takes it reasonably well. And at this point I can get a Toxic off, which puts me in a good position. He hits the T-Wave now. So this is one of those positions where hitting the T-Wave earlier gave him a chance, better chance of not having to deal with Toxic, amongst other things. It's really hard to backtrack something from the early match all the way to the late. So I get the Toxic off. This is great. I can start whittling this down. Paralyzed Uxie is no longer a check to Blaziken. I fire off a U-turn. Since now I'm slower, I've got slow U-turn now. And so if he switches, I guess it's kind of risky, because if I get full parried and he goes into Blaziken or something, I do still have Latios at full health, who, like I said, checks everything except like an SD Night Slash set. So I fire off a U-turn. He just ends up killing me here with Hex, which makes a lot of sense. And here I have to think about this for a second. He's not in range of Crunch from Crocodile, but I really want to keep everyone else healthy. Crocodile's still good, but it feels difficult to use at this point. And he could still think that I'm Dark Z. He doesn't know my set. I might have just wanted to get a little bit more damage before I Dark Z. If I'm Dark Z substitute here, I just win. So I go into Krok, and since I know that I don't kill from this range, I just have to go for sub. I have to let Toxic whittle him down a little bit. So I go for sub, and again, Dark Soul makes a good play, stays in, gets the Dragon Pulse off, prevents me from getting a sub up. I do know that I have enough HP to win this 1v1, so I'm just going to go ahead and stay in and sub. At 51%, there was a roll, potentially, depending again on his investment and a bunch of other things, but I didn't have a good sense for what his investment was, and I knew one more turn of Toxic put him in range for sure, and the health on Crocodile didn't seem super important. Am I over? I don't even know if I'm over 100 HP anymore. So I just fire off another substitute. He Dragon Pulses, and now I know I can knock out with Crunch, guaranteed. So I just go ahead and go for the Crunch and get a Moxie boost. So I'm +1. This part's interesting. Apparently, Dark Souls, he goes into Umbreon, which confused me because I assumed that he would go straight into Blaziken, who is base 100, outspeeds Crocodile, would get a free kill and a free speed boost. The only reason that I was okay with that line of play is because I had Latios available and I had Earthquake on Crocodile, so he couldn't set up and kill Crocodile. So Umbreon was an interesting play. It's really good I switched to Fight Z here. Although if I was Dark Z, I'd get the kill on Giratina at a higher health, and then Umbreon has trouble switching in. I don't think foul play is breaking my sub, but maybe after a Moxie boost. So I go ahead and fire off the Z. This kills Umbreon. It's base power 200 and I'm +1. So in this play, at this point, I'm in a really good position. Chansey could come in. He doesn't know if I'm superpower though, and if I'm superpower, I kill. If he assumed I was Focus Punch for some reason, Chansey could come in and Seismic Toss. But he basically is forced to go to Blaziken. So Blaziken takes rocks. Blaziken has to kill me here. It doesn't have really a choice. Goes for the low kick. Low kick's good. Doesn't risk high jump kick. Doesn't risk protect. That's another thing driving me to run protect is high jump kick. So another really smart team building decision to go with low kick, especially with just with, a lot of my team's really heavy. Low kicks hitting everything pretty decently. So I go Latios because I know Latios can take a hit. Mega Latios, again, crit Night Slash is about the best he can do. And that does max 80. So Psyshock knocks out. So this position feels comfortable for me. Just go for the Psyshock, feels like a safe play. To be honest, at that point, I thought the game was over. I didn't see a way for him to win. But Dark Soul brings it back. So I fire off the Psyshock, and I do not do enough damage here. Bring him down to 50. I go Magearna. This might have been a choke, to be honest. I went Magearna to cover. I felt like Magearna gave me an additional chance. So worst case scenario, he doubles into Blaziken. Blaziken kills Magearna, and I just go back out to Lottie. If he stays with Chansey, I could potentially set up with Shift Gear and keep Chansey low, basically, like guarantee that Chansey doesn't end at 100% with the interaction. I think this might have been a slight misplay on my part. Zera Aura was, I think, a 3-0 if I go Zera Aura there. He can't kill me with Seismic Toss. He could potentially Toxic me, but who cares? Close Combat at this point kills both of his Pokemon. And if he recovers, I keep him low either way. I actually kill him either way. Because Close Combat kills Blaziken after 2 rounds of rocks. So this was a bit of a misplay on my part for sure. Zera Aura was always the play here. There's not really, sort of again, like a really weird Chansey set. There wasn't really anything he could do at that point if I go Zera Aura. But I go Magearna, he gets us off a soft boiled, and I realized my mistake at this point, and I pivot to Zera, who I know can take anything. Seismic Toss, unfortunately, I'm in range of 2, so I just get off the close combat damage. And I guess Dark Soul might have thought I was a mix set here. So I do 69%, which is more than it would be the max. He actually ended up having a low HP. It was max defense, max special defense, so it did a bit more damage. So he soft boiled, just basically trying to stall out my life orb here. But I'm doing too much damage, and if I die to life orb, even after a soft boiled, he's kind of in trouble. So I'm doing 69%, he's recovering 50, right? So I do another 69, you know, knocking down 20s at 60. I kill him next turn. So I get a close combat off. He goes down to 7. He wishes here. It says it's a misclick, which I believe there's no reason to wish here unless you're predicting like a switch on my part or something. But even then, it doesn't really accomplish much. So close combat. Even if he does soft boiled there, I'm sitting at, you know, next one does, you know, around 70, and you'll only be at 57. So I'm picking up a kill here regardless. Zera Aura does go down to the close combat, but I have to make sure Chansey's dead because I know Lottie closes this game out. So I go Lottie. He brings in Blaziken. The rocks damage. Again, I know I'm out of range of crit Night Slash, so this feels wrapped up to me. He goes for Rock Slide. And doesn't flinch me, and Psyshock wins the game. So I think Dark Soul played this match really, really well. Like the only play that I think wasn't right was Chansey to Pharaoh, and I think Dark Soul would probably agree. I think his prep was really good. I don't know, it was a really scary match for me, and I think he brought the right sets. And you know, if the little bit of luck at the beginning goes differently, it's a whole different match. I think the only misplay that I feel that I made, maybe, was Zera towards the end of the game, or switching into Magearna instead of Zera. I think that was a misplay, but I don't... It's hard to envision a scenario where that necessarily blows up in my face. It can put me in a bad spot, but I don't know if it was a losing play, for instance. It wasn't a winning play for sure. Anyway, this brings us to 4-2 and bumps differential a couple points, which isn't a huge deal. Still got a makeup match to do for week 5. We'll have to do that probably sometime tomorrow. Yeah, thanks for watching, and if you have any comments, questions, concerns, probably concerns. This team was weird and bad. Leave them below in the comments or hit me up. Later. I almost completely forgot, and I think I would get killed if I did forget. Shout outs to Ashy and Steven for the cooperative team build help last evening when I was struggling through this. Regenix and Perp Derpy also chimed in for a little bit, so thanks. Appreciate it, guys.